Hello, welcome to Nerd Variety. I am Hunter, joined today by Hannah Hogan
Hello.
and Josh Davies.
Hey,
Yeah.
Wow, Josh
So-
sounds excited.
There
It's Monday.
are a lot
It's
of
always
different
Monday.
forms of media these days that we consume on a regular basis, at least that
Nom,
I
nom,
do.
nom, 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 nom.
Yes. And a lot of these, you get a lot of adaptations. You get a lot of books that change to movies. You get that are adapted to movies. You get a lot of movies that adapted to books, games to movies, books to games, all that, all sorts of things, and TV shows as well. So those are some things that we're going to be discussing today. What do we think of them? What are some of the best, and what are some examples of things? Going to try to focus on some things that are maybe a little lesser known to wider audiences, but we'll hit some of your favorites probably.
We'll try to educate you as best we can.
Yeah. So first of all, we'll start with some of the more common ones. Books to movies. Now, there was even a class I almost took in college. Didn't actually take it, so it's useless to come up. But to me, that just kind of says right there just how popular it is, that it's a whole thing they're teaching in film school, adapting books to film and all that. So why do you guys think it is such a common form of adaptation?
It's very easy.
Is it?
Because usually you have a book and a book's subsequent follow-ups, and it makes it, the narrative is, if the book is written well, it's a very straightforward story. The only thing they really have to worry about is, do they need to change things versus support the rating of what kind of rating they want? Can they cast people that look alike? Or do they have to swap anything, like gender or race wise, or maybe tone out some elements that don't fit with the time frame that the movie's being shown in? But other than that, it's usually pretty easy.
I feel like one of the biggest things that goes into creating a story of any kind, but specifically if you're going to go somewhere along the sci-fi fantasy route, is world building. Right, creating what is going on here? Like, do the people have magic? Do they use science? Do they what's their government like? What's their religion like? And that stuff tends to be, in good books, flushed out a good bit.
Yeah.
And so that gives you a really good foundation to create sort of this visual world based on all this work that's kind of already been done before you, right? So not only do you have the plot and the script and the characters, but you've got all of this background that you can use for set design and costume design that you don't really have to think about as much, because it's all kind of laid out as a framework for you.
Yeah, you'll have a narration for some of the movie of this has been going on for so many years, and we live like this for all of our lives, and I'm a man living in this time frame, and they'll just kind of narrate some of the stuff that you usually just read, that you would read through, while kind of actually showing dialogue and scenes for the big events of the movie.
Yeah, versus trying to go the other direction, turning a movie into a book. There's a lot of stuff that's sort of implied but not explicitly stated that you then have to sort of extrapolate from the movie in order to turn it into text.
Yeah, but I do think there is also there's a problem sometimes, and actually probably quite often, where you do lose some important things when going from a book to a movie, because obviously a movie has to be much more condensed. Even with the 8 films that they adapted Harry Potter to from the books, there's a lot of character arcs missing in there. There's
and just characters.
Yeah, just characters.
Yeah,
and they changed some things completely. So things just obviously always kind of have to get cut, but I think it is good to have that extra stuff, that extra description in books, and I think that's something that just should make it easier to adapt.
Yeah, and I think that filmmakers are finally realizing, and I just specifically remember noticing this as a younger woman as the Hunger Games movies were coming out, that as they went through them, they got closer and closer to the books, and people kind of enjoyed them more and more. Right? So I think filmmakers are finally figuring out that, like, if they stick to the books, even if they have to break a book into 2 movies or 3 movies like they did in The Hobbit, I mean, that wasn't necessarily super accurate, but but even if they have to make multiple movies, staying closer to the script and giving us like those complicated story arcs and character arcs is something that I feel like people are beginning to appreciate.
Yeah, because you can see how people can run out of steam when making a trilogy of movies based off original content. When you have a book, you don't lose that steam unless the writer may have lost a little steam when writing it, but they finished it. And if it's good enough, to make as a movie, then they're like, okay, this works out. This works out.
Yeah, and we live in a culture right now of just like super fans, and so if you have to create 2 or 3 movies out of your one book in order to like appease all of the plot stuff going on, like people are still going to come pay to see your movie. Like you're not going to lose money on that because people are going to see all of them.
Yeah. Well, so what are some of your favorites, or what do you think are some of the best adaptations in this, from books to movies?
I mean, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't actually read the books, but I'm working on that.
So you really can't say. So
I just know they're great movies.
But
right?
But that's not what makes it a good adaptation. That's what makes it a good movie. No, because a good adaptation is within the context of adapting from book novel to
I don't know. That sounds
film.
like it might be a debate for another day.
No, that's just how the question was phrased.
I am also guilty of not reading through the entire trilogy. I did read Fellowship, and I did read The Hobbit, so I can say that those 2 were amazing, almost perfect adaptations. I would say for The Hobbit, I think is the best one in the trilogy. The first one that was more akin to like, okay, this is pretty spot on to what I was reading while I was reading the book.
Yeah.
I've heard I wish I could say from reading the books, but I've heard that Interview with a Vampire, and after watching it, and The Girl with All the Gifts. Have y'all heard of that one?
I have not.
I've heard
of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
That one's also, I hear, is also a really good adaptation. But those 2 that I've actually watched, I heard they are really spot on adaptations to their books. The Girl with All the Gifts is a zombie girl who lives in a dystopian society that's been overrun by zombies and all that stuff.
Well,
one that I have read and seen the movie was Ready Player One, and that was a very good adaptation, I would say.
I just borrowed the audiobook, but I haven't seen the movie yet.
Yeah, I enjoyed the movie. Yeah. I haven't read the book, but one that I do remember, I unfortunately never got around to reading all of them because there were a lot. I did read many of them in the series. A series of unfortunate events, actually, and
my turn to scoff and be like, you haven't read all of them?
There were like 12 or 13 or
13, and they're all fantastic.
They are, I will agree, but I was a kid and I was not able to focus on a book for more than
they went and hunted mushrooms for like 2 chapters, and
their books were very good
in Lord of the Rings.
Books were great, and I remember as a kid enjoying the film adaptation just because I was a big Jim Carrey fan. Time,
You clearly did not read the books then.
Everyone was a Jim Carrey fan.
Hannah, shut up. No, they did a decent job adapting the film even, but that was where they had to. Yes, they did. Shut up. They had to cram 3 books into one movie, so it was.
They didn't have to.
Which
Hannah,
was not
I
a
am
good
talking
idea.
here.
It was terrible.
But when they did, eventually come back in the past few years, just recently, they did the Netflix series, which was much better because they gave it a lot more time to adapt a lot more stuff, a lot more content to the screen, and it just really Hannah, I said,
hey, you're allowed to hate Rogue One.
I said when I was a kid I enjoyed it. I didn't say it was a good movie.
I have mixed feelings about the Chronicles of Narnia series. Because I have read all those books, and the first movie was really good, but they
We've
really
discussed this many times before. We're gonna move on.
I'm really
from
upset.
That. Okay.
I can also agree with you that the first one, Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe, was is like the best adaptation of the book. But there have been some, as the other ones kind of got on, they kind of got worse and worse. One book that I read through, and I was really attached to, and then watched the movie. I was kind of like, the movie was good, but I was disappointed that they didn't keep up the original plot of the book, World War Z. In the book, it's more of like the guys interviewing people's stories of the zombies, and you think it's going to be, oh, they're going to go back, he's going to talk about his side for a little bit and then show the whole thing. But no, they just did an original story, and they changed the zombies and made their own story, which wasn't that bad. But
I mean, that can work.
It can work,
I think.
But I feel like everyone would have gotten a more deserving. Like, you could have stretched that book into 3 movies and told and broken up the story that way, and it still would have been very, compelling, and you would have made a lot of money, or they would have had a lot more fans keep following them.
Yeah. So, what do you guys? How do you guys feel about movie adaptations of movies to books?
Where
most of the time you would just call that a novelization.
Where?
Okay. Yeah, so a lot of times that's just kind of a novelization, it's not necessarily an adaptation, but they do, that is pretty common. I know I've seen it quite a bit, but
I feel like most of what I see is a book that was turned into a movie, and then they like reprint the book with stills from the movie.
Yeah,
I feel like I've seen that a lot. But it's like the same book.
They do a lot of novelizations as well, though. I don't do a lot of that kind of reading, though, so I can't name many off the top of my head. I know that's a flimsy little that makes my story pretty flimsy, but
let's Google it.
Happened. And well, also what I had written down here was what is the difference between an adaptation of a movie to a book and a novelization? Is there a difference, or is that just what they're called?
I guess in most, like what Hannah said, in most cases, it's usually just they reprint the book, and here's the book you can read, and it's got the movie stuff, so you can actually kind of see, you kind of have a picture of all the characters that you saw in the movie in your head as you're reading this. But most are, I guess if they do make a book adaptation of a movie, it's usually a continuation, or maybe a side story or something like that.
Yeah, and
there's apparently
that happens a lot.
There's apparently a Total Recall book, but like the movie was the original thing.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that. Yeah.
So I have not read it, but the internet says it's pretty good.
Yeah. But so that's a thing that happens. I'm sorry. What?
Yeah. It gives them time to say, "Hey, now we have a book. We have a book plan. We can slow down and world build.
It is a good way
if we didn't have a chance to in the movie, and actually show some deeper, aspects to the story."
Yeah, and it's nice because if you are more of a fan of getting more in depth with characters, especially if it's a story you really love, then with a book, obviously, moving to that, you can kind of get more thought processes of what the characters are thinking.
This is technically TV to a book, and I don't know if you'd really call it a adaptation, but I do know there's like an Avatar: The Last Airbender comic book. Like there's several, actually.
That's another thing as well. So like Star Wars also did that. I don't know if you're familiar. There's a lot of like Darth Vader comic books and plenty of other ones in the Star Wars universe. It's published by Marvel. So
and it's not, I don't know if I'd really consider it an adaptation because it's not like the same stories, but it is sort of just like a continuation of the universe.
Yeah.
So
or you could say, Hunter, that I believe there were book adaptations or book continuations of the sequel trilogy instead of like, you have the comics, of course, but you also have book continuations.
Yeah, you have that as well. And again,
which
that's a good point. Speaking of like Star Wars, there was things that we talked about with when we did our Star Wars episode, the Thrawn trilogy, a lot of the stuff following episode 6 as well. Just a lot of that. So I think usually things like that work best, but again, I don't know if that would necessarily be considered an adaptation. We can talk about that maybe a little later on. But yeah, so that's dealing with movies and books. But now, what about games to movies?
They haven't had a great track record so far.
They haven't. Personally, as a fan of many games that have been adapted to movies,
A fan of the games or a fan of the movies?
Games.
Okay.
Games. I have found stuff that I enjoyed about those movies, but that's probably more of a place of I enjoyed the hell out of these games, so I am going to enjoy something in this movie.
Just seeing familiar characters or familiar backdrops or anything. You're just like, more of this thing I love, yay! It's not as good as most of it, but I'll take anything I can get.
Yeah, and like that, that's a question I had too. Like, why are these so difficult? Like, because you said they don't have a great track record. Why do you guys think that is?
Question: are we including? We knew it was going to come eventually. Are we including the Witcher TV show? Because technically, the books were the original thing.
Yeah. So that was also another thing I didn't know when to bring up. Now I guess is as good a time as any.
As far as I can tell. Yeah, as far as I can tell, people loved the Witcher show.
Yes.
Yeah, the show is
awesome.
The show's good,
like,
but that is less. That is much more. I guess we should have talked about this already, but that's definitely more of an adaptation of a book to a TV show.
Mm-hmm.
Because the TV show, I don't know if you're familiar, it takes the stories from the first two books, which are collections of short stories.
I don't know that because I haven't read the books because someone didn't bring them last time they came to my house, Hunter.
I told you my dad packed them away and hasn't unpacked them yet.
Well, luckily,
he just moved, so
I recently renewed my library card and they have them at the library, so I just have to wait for people to be done with them.
I mean, I was just saying my dad's done moving now, so I can bring it to you next time I see you.
Yay.
Kids and adults, go to the library. They have
library.
They have free stuff. You can catch up on all your favorite books that you
I'm going to listen to the Fellowship of the Ring because I honestly just couldn't get through it by reading it.
Yeah, they have audiobooks too at the library.
Yeah, the
go to the library.
The first two books are really the inspiration, almost directly or pretty much directly for the Witcher TV show. It's a little different, just in how like the chronology of all of it. They kind of jumble it a lot up. I mean, and it makes it confusing, but I still think it's good.
I do think it's interesting, though, because I feel like probably most people are more familiar with the games than the books.
Yeah.
So as a show that's mostly been perceived as an adaptation of a game, it's been wildly successful.
Yeah,
compared to most others.
I've heard it more as people seem to understand as an adaptation of the books, but I don't know if that's just where I'm looking.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's all based off what
the games also aren't really an adaptation. I guess that comes back to the point I had before, or the question I was just pondering myself. Because the games take place after all of the books, so it's more of a continuation on that story. So is that still something that's an adaptation, or is a continuation just
I don't know, but it's all great.
Yeah.
But video games have gotten better as time has gone on. Video games have a lot of high fantasy, a lot of crazy made up looking characters, and it's been really hard to translate that with the technology we've had to now putting those on screen. Let's look at you have the original Mortal Kombat movie. How
I love it.
It's great now, but back then I'm sure people kind of enjoyed it, but also like why is it shouldn't look like a PS2 game, right?
I think it was really that middle time. Game. I think it was that middle time, like when it was new. I think it was probably awesome and wonderful because it was, to me, I remember it being about the same kind of quality as Power Rangers.
Yeah, true.
It's really over the top, really campy, really cheesy.
Yeah.
And then a little bit later, it was like it was really starting to show just how bad it was. And now, especially now, we're back at it's a nostalgia thing, and we love it just because it was fun.
Yeah. But I feel like the technology. Sorry.
I was going to say, unlike that one, another older one that was made, Super Mario Brothers.
Ugh.
Yeah, that was a movie, which was
That was a movie.
yeah.
But you know, in terms of the Mortal Kombat stuff, we also did get a bunch of like YouTube like short things. I don't even know what they want to call it. If it was a web series or something,
mini
but,
series.
it was like Mortal Kombat Legacy, I think it was.
Short films.
Yeah, it was good, and I think they're coming back and actually doing a new live action movie on that. So I'm excited, especially just seeing the direction that they've been going with the storytelling in games to see what they're gonna do. But,
yeah,
I think it's interesting because I feel like the technology for movies and games is kind of like coinciding.
Yeah.
Right, like I feel like our games are starting to look more and more like movies, and our movies are starting to have the CGI and graphics that we've been putting into our games. Like I feel like they're coming together, and I think about when I first saw footage of the Uncharted 4 game and was just like blown away by like, this looks like a movie. Right, and so it gives me a lot of hope that the Uncharted movie will be like pretty good, because like they're becoming, I feel like, more compatible.
Well, and honestly, that point, especially with the Uncharted thing, that's something that I'm thinking is maybe a problem, maybe something that makes it difficult when talking about adaptations from games to movies, because especially with the advances that games are making in storytelling, it almost feels unnecessary or redundant to make it a movie, you know.
Especially when, you know, I don't know, how many hours do you think it takes to play Uncharted 4?
It depends on how fast you play through it, honestly.
Let's Google it.
Maybe about 20, 30. Probably about 20.
Yeah, this is saying 18.
Yeah. I played through
so
it
it's
twice, I think.
You could make an 18-hour game, but like trying to condense that same story into even a 3-hour movie.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
are you going to make several movies and just make it the game, but you can't decide what happens?
But I mean, you know, a big thing about, obviously one major part that takes up the chunk of a game's runtime is that you have so much of that you just spend killing waves of enemies.
Yeah,
apparently most of the time.
Apparently the minimum time for Uncharted 4 was an hour.
That does not surprise me.
Okay.
I mean, you could also just
skip all the cutscenes.
You could almost just look up on YouTube like a collection of. You could just look up like the story, like the cutscenes, basically, and that'll pretty much tell you the story length. Even there, though, you know, you got. I think what makes the games enjoyable is that you're controlling it and you have a part to play in it.
Yeah. Well, and I think back on my experiences with the Telltale Batman games and about how much more powerful it was, the fact that I was Batman and I had to make these choices and none of the choices were good choices.
Yeah.
Like how much more it affected me as a consumer than just watching a Batman movie.
Yeah. I was going to say,
like, understanding his struggles versus really experiencing them.
You really ought to play like the Game of Thrones one. That one, and
I did
just
a little
The Walking
bit.
Dead. It's
I
like,
did a little bit of The Walking Dead.
like,
I didn't even know they had a Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it's like there are no good choices.
Yeah, and it's so stressful, and I was it's a good time though.
But we've had some good video game adaptations into movies, and one thing that's helped is that these are like somewhat older properties, or it's been a while before they've been revisited, that they come out as games. Detective Pikachu, Sonic the Hedgehog, I heard was good.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it might be that they're also not trying to follow the story of the games.
Yeah, and I was actually going to make a quick point on what I think Sonic the Hedgehog did really well. Something that I've been talking about. I think they played it safe with the story, but did justice to the characters, the two characters that are actually from the games, that being Sonic and Dr. Robotnik. Right. I think Jim Carrey is great here. This is like 90s Jim Carrey.
I love it.
That's what I want to see.
Yeah, and again, like in terms of the story, it wasn't anything particularly groundbreaking. It was pretty obvious, you know, like it was a nice family friendly movie.
But
Yeah,
I feel like when you're trying to
the
turn a
sonic
video
stuff
game
was
into
good.
a movie, you just kind of want to not disappoint people.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think a big thing is that when you're trying to make a video game into a movie, video games get so crazy that that's not necessarily that's going to be something that's immediately appealing to mass audience.
So, quick question, and this just occurred
Resident
to me.
Evil.
Do we think that the Witcher TV show would have been as successful if it was a movie instead of a TV show? Or do you think that games translate to TV shows better than they do to movies?
Looking at how that's more of a book adaptation, it works a lot better as a TV series.
And I feel like
in my opinion, anyway.
I feel like in general that would make sense, right? Because if you're trying to turn a game like Uncharted, which is 18 hours, into a 2-hour movie versus a 12-hour series.
Yeah. That
seems
is
like
something I like a lot more about like TV
Mhm.
than movies, because you do have that extra time to really flesh out characters.
And so many
world.
games have like side quests. So it's like, oh, we're just going to go do an episode about this. And then we're going to go do an episode about this. And run all these random side quests with these characters.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot more potential there.
Yeah. But, there are some really good ones. There are some really bad ones.
Super Mario.
Yeah. But like I enjoyed some like Warcraft. I actually really enjoyed that, but that's just because I'm a big fan of that franchise.
Did you see the Assassin's Creed one?
I did, and actually, thanks for bringing that up, because my thing about that, which I'm always defending it, because I liked that it was more of a continuation, and not even so much that, but it was just like another story in this world that helped flesh it all out.
It falls into those categories of that category of movies that I'm like, I don't think it was a good movie, but I thought it was a fun movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was fine.
I don't regret going to see it.
And I mean, I think they did a good job with turning that into a movie, because they focused on the stuff that I think works best in a movie as opposed to the video game. Being that they focused more on the modern day storytelling and less on the gimmicky gameplay stuff that you see like in the past.
Yeah.
I plan to watch that when I have a chance.
And
that's all right.
But something that I feel like has been around longer, like what about adaptations of movies to video games? So there's a lot of most commonly, I guess it's video game tie-ins or movie tie-ins, tie-in games.
Yeah.
And from what I remember, at least some of these work very successfully. Like the one that I always think of, because it's always brought up on so many lists, is the Wolverine one, X-Men Origins Wolverine game. That supposedly was so much better than the movie, which is not difficult, but
yeah.
I feel like it's very hit or miss, because I can imagine can't think of any good ones off the top of my head, but I think of a lot of bad ones, and I feel like it's mostly just like I feel like there's a lot of cheap garbage made off of like video game turning kids movies into video games.
Yeah.
Like Disney video games. And it's like, why is this a thing?
Like Kingdom Hearts.
No, Kingdom Hearts is great.
But going back off like if you look back at old consoles and the game, they turned like almost anything, any kind of series or TV show or TV series or movies into video games. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they were just really basic things just put out there to make money.
I saw footage of a Shrek video game that should never have existed.
Yeah, there are some bad ones, but also like some games that I really loved growing up. I keep wanting to. I try so hard to find them somewhere else. I don't know where I can find them though. I like the Harry Potter video games, which I would say
Lego Harry Potter.
No. They were like actual Lego, not Lego. They were not Lego. They were actual Harry Potter video games. And I would say they were more based on the movies. But even still, it was loose because it was a platforming game. Yeah, but you did have characters like Peeves, and you had like the Death Day party for Nearly Headless Nick. Yeah, all that stuff. So I was happy with some of that, and the gameplay wasn't great. I enjoyed it as a kid because I liked platforming games. They were fun, enjoyable, and all that. But
a
I feel like
lot of the problems with some of those movie to game adaptations or tie-ins were that they were kind of rushed. Sometimes they adapted, like they tried to stretch the story out when you really couldn't. And it was just kind of like, and buy this too. And it's like,
it's
okay.
A lot of times it feels like a cash grab.
Yeah, I feel like it's a medium
that
can go really, really well. And honestly, I bring up the Lego games because I feel like they're pretty good games.
Yeah.
Like they're fun and they're like they tell a good story a lot of the time.
And you could say that's a game to movie adaptation too.
You could. But I feel like, a lot of the time, especially with platforms, it's like, let's just make a basic platformer and then like reskin it and like change some of the dialogue. And hey, we turn Harry Potter into Shrek. Like, I don't know, it's the same exact game, but I'm just saying you could take like the Harry Potter game and just like change it up a little bit visually, and all of a sudden it's something completely different.
That's some crazy magic you got there.
So do these still exist? Like, are these still things that we see a lot? Like movies being adapted to video games, or the video game tie-in movies?
What? I mean,
games.
You mentioned the Game of Thrones game, which is technically a book to a game.
I mean, a key one example that I recall, because as the Marvel movies were coming out, like Phase 1 movies were coming out, they had a video game tie-in. It was
like Iron Man,
Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, even Captain America. All those had games to go with them. After Avengers, they're like, we don't do that anymore.
I guess
that's done.
So, like, do we think those are kind of dying out now?
I would say they're dying out. I haven't seen a whole lot of good examples myself.
I don't know, because I feel like anytime you see like a superhero, like anything DC or Marvel, that would be a book or a comic book to a game.
Yeah, but we're talking about like movies to a game, and again, that's I'd say that's not really an adaptation. Again, like the Captain America one, the Iron Man one, Thor, all of those were specifically movie.
Like the plots of the movie.
Yeah, they usually had the
they looked like the actors too.
Yeah, the main actor could voice it, or they could have like a sound alike.
Gotcha.
You know.
Yeah. And
I don't know, not very knowledgeable, I guess.
Yeah, so usually not better than the movie, but sometimes. So that's a very mixed medium, I think.
Or you can take one that's from an older movie. That tends to work a lot better.
Yeah. And so what about like books to games? Now, we hit on this a few times before already with like The Witcher. Those are more continuations. But well, what are some other things? I actually pulled up a list here, I think. But do you guys know any off the top of your head?
I mean, if there's Harry Potter games, that's technically what that is.
Yeah. Well, there's also like the like Middle-earth games. Specifically, I remember a little more recently, there was like a Shadow of War, which actually was the sequel. Before that, Shadow of Mordor. Right. Those are really good games. The second one got a bit annoying with.
I feel like when for some reason when people are making games, whether it's based on a movie or a book, I feel like if it's based on something, it still has like the same potential as most games to be a really good game. But I feel like they also have a lot of potential to be really bad. Like regardless of whether it's from a movie or a book, if you're just trying to do it to like create more stuff for the people to consume, then I feel like it has a tendency to go pretty poorly.
Yeah, but I think there is also plenty of examples of just trying to get a player invested in, or that enjoys that character, that series, trying to get them to be a part of it and give them an opportunity to kind of engage and immerse themselves in that world. Like I remember there's the Sherlock Holmes games. I haven't played a lot of them, but I played like Crimes and Punishment, and then there's like the Devil's Daughter or something like that. These are pretty fun games, and obviously those are based more on the books, you know, because there's a lot more content in the books than we've seen like in Sherlock, the show, and the Sherlock Holmes movies and everything. But Yeah, so those are really good, and I think it works well because they make it more like a mystery, and you like kind of have to solve the mysteries, but you also you're playing as Sherlock Holmes, so you have like different abilities. I just think they're done really well.
Yeah. What was the original format for The Walking Dead?
That was a comic book.
It was a comic book?
Yeah.
Okay, because there's some really good Walking Dead games out there.
Yeah, the Telltale ones especially. Beyond that, I'm not really sure. I know there have been a couple that have kind of flopped.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you
like
could say that
shooters.
well, never mind. I was going to say that we were talking about the Telltale Game of Thrones. That's kind of a game based off the book, even though it's more akin to the TV series.
Basically, we just like Telltale games here at Nerd Variety.
I need to get it. I'm trying to get into them, but I just don't like the decisions that I have to make.
Well, but that's part of what makes it amazing is because it's so real.
But you don't hear, you don't see on screen or hear, oh, you made this decision. That person will remember you did that. Like,
sometimes
I thought I made the right decision. That's not fair.
Like, do they have more respect for me or do they hate me?
Why are you picking on me?
There's also like
I love it.
Maybe a couple others that are lesser known.
Person.
There's definitely some H.P. Lovecraft games, inspired games. Some more recent that I remember seeing, haven't gotten around to playing yet, though, are like Moons of Madness. I'm actually not even sure if that's quite out yet. It may have just released or maybe coming up soon. There's also a Call of Cthulhu, which looks to be interesting. And Bloodborne it's very heavily inspired by that. But and I think that's a fantastic game. And then there's like an Alice in Wonderland, a few of those. I remember one that I have been looking at for a while that was actually on the Xbox 360. I never got around to being able to play it yet. But it looks really interesting. It's called like Madness Returns. It's I guess it's a sequel to like a 2000 game or something. It looks very interesting. So I would be excited to play that if I could.
Yeah. I guess it can be a little difficult to make to twist a book into a game. I guess that's something a lot of people don't feel like trying when it's easier. It could be easier to make a book into a movie and get more fans and people into it. But now, with way games have progressed as far as technology wise, you could translate a lot from a book and get that full experience from reading the book into playing a game because you're actually playing as that character, like you said, Hannah, actually making those decisions or reenacting what they did.
Yeah. So now let's talk about the opposite. Instead of books to games, what about games to books? Does that really happen a lot? Or
the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is the like Five Nights at Freddy's stuff, but it's all made by the same guy.
Yeah.
Like he made his games and now he's also making books.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can think of immediately.
Yeah.
I know, Josh, you're probably I feel like you mentioned before you're pretty familiar with some of the Halo stuff, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. With the books coming out, with the games coming out, and kind of a big gap between each one, they brought in books to kind of show what happened between it. A lot of books, there are a few took place between Halo 1, Halo 2. Some books that kind of happened alongside, more of like a novelization of the game. And of course they had some more of like, let's talk about the very beginning of the Covenant War and some of these minor characters that you see in games, but you want to know their full backstory. And then especially I've been reading right now are some of the Halo Forerunner novels. It's a trilogy talking about what the Didact, the villain from Halo 4, and his origins, kind of filling in some of the gaps that you didn't hear, that you weren't really sure of, because there's a lot of weird language, weird ancient stuff going on. But they're pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting to read that out, or read out that mystery time frame of before the activation of the Halos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like a good medium to do that in. If you're creating a bunch of different games in the same universe, but they're not necessarily all like immediately back to back to back, creating some sort of written, I think honestly would be, it's like just a novel.
Yeah.
Because I think it'd be cool if you did like a comic book. I think that would also be an interesting way to do
I think
it.
they've done that
Mhm.
too with Halo. I know
Yeah.
they've done that with other games as well, though.
Yeah. But there's so
I
much
feel like,
story you can tell.
yeah. Yeah, but I feel like it's a good way to fill in the gaps.
I know for sure they've done that quite a bit with Assassin's Creed. Speaking of the movie as well, they did. But they have a lot of comics with that. And that's one franchise in particular that I'm actually kind of disappointed with, because there was like a major plot thread that was started in like the second game or something.
Yeah.
And they ended up wrapping it up in a comic book. So that was irritating. Because then you go from one game to the next and you're like, wait, what happened? This was a major thing.
Yeah. Like Halo 4 to Halo 5, I mean, there was a lot that they could have explained, because there was so much. There was like a big jump between like, oh, it's Master Chief and all of his crew are back together, and of course you had to read the comics, which which the game still didn't quite say like, oh yeah, it didn't pick up right from when the comic ended.
Yeah.
I think an interesting thing that happens in terms of books based on games, or I guess it's less of an adaptation and more of like, I feel like there's I guess what you could almost call like instruction manuals, not instruction manuals, but like game,
I mean, I guess
aids. So I think of like I know Minecraft has several where it's like a Minecraft strategy guide, but it's kind of like a novel. Like, I went into Minecraft and I had to build a base, and this is how I did it. And so I feel like there's this interesting, I kind of like instruction manual type thing that I feel like people are doing with books these days, where it's like, here's the game and here's like kind of like the if you've actually read the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them book. It's like a book that was a book in the Harry Potter universe, and I feel like people are kind of doing the same thing with books and games.
Yeah, and well, like what I think is like the best probably way to implement these is I know I go on about this a lot. I try not to, but with Warcraft, World of Warcraft in particular, they do a lot of really fleshing out the world and the history of it. With the books, I think they do a good job, especially with expansions and stuff coming out every like 2 or 3 years. Now, there's always like those books that I'm looking forward to that kind of fill in some gaps between the expansions, but also if you read them, you'd probably know that they're not really necessary, but they do add that extra immersion, really kind of help set up some stuff if you're interested like I am. But on that note as well, I can think of like a few companies that game companies that publish a lot of books like that, like BioWare is another one, but because it does often have that kind of motive and ideas behind it, where it can help flesh out the world, but it's not necessary always. Do you think these books actually have appeal to mass audiences? Like, do you think they just appeal to gamers that are also readers, or do they appeal to just like book lovers, even if they're not into the game? Or
just hardcore fans?
Yeah, hardcore fans that want some closure, or they love that sense of continuity. Like myself, I love like continuity between a series, and if I can find like what happened between this doesn't make any sense, or you're just going to explain it just like that. I need a little more to complete the timeline in my head.
Yeah, it just makes me think about Matthew from our guest from a couple of weeks ago, who's like read all these Star Wars books, and I'm like, turns out I'm a pretty casual fan, and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah,
because there's a ton more out there.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you have more to fill in if we ever do a Star Trek episode.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you do. But anyways, so yeah, those are a lot. Just kind of barely scratching the surface of a lot of these adaptations and everything. Is there one of these that you think has the best like change over, like the best adaptation success rate, I guess?
Are we still talking about games to books?
Just any adaptation. Do you think there's a form of adaptation that has the best success rate?
I think books to movies is the obvious one. Yeah.
Could we rank them perhaps?
Oh gosh, I don't know if we have time for all that.
If we want to rank it, let's do a smaller video for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do have a question though. I want to know if you guys could take something and put it into another format, what would you do? I think it'd be really cool to take a game or a movie and to make a movie or a game out of it or whatever, right? I think it'd be really interesting. I think that The Legend of Zelda has a lot of potential as a TV show. Don't think it would make a good movie. I think it could make a cool TV show.
It just hurts me thinking about it because I remember like in 2011 they did an April Fool's prank on that, and it was.
Aww.
It looked so good.
Oh no.
And then they're like, it is an April Fool's prank. I'm like.
Yeah. Let me reiterate. I don't think it would make a good movie. I think it would make a really cool TV show.
It was a TV show, actually. Yeah. And it was a bad TV show. Same with Sonic the Hedgehog. Although I don't remember how bad that was, but same with
terrible.
Pokemon.
Yeah. Anyway, what adaptations would you guys make?
Oh man.
I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here.
So personally, maybe Destiny, but I'm that's only what's coming to my head right now.
You would take it from what to what?
A video game to a movie. Or a TV show. Probably a TV show, honestly.
TV show would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Actually, just a little. I'm gonna try to make this quick. A little note. I saw something on Facebook about like the last show you watched is now merged with the last game you played, and what would it be? And for me, that was Destiny 2 merged with Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and I'm like, I would watch the crap out of that show. I would love it.
The last what?
The last show you watched and the last game you played. Yeah.
Oh God.
Interesting.
Well, that for me would be Pokemon and Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Well, that's basically Detective Pikachu, right?
Yeah. That'd be so weird.
Yeah, but I'd probably say Destiny, but I also want more Warcraft movies just because that has such good stuff.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with. There's a book series. I can never remember how it's pronounced. It's the one with the Black Cauldron, and there was a Disney movie based on it back in the day, but it was kind of terrible. But it's a really fantastic fantasy series. And so I would love to actually see that given justice. Same with Chronicles of Narnia. Yeah. We need to legitimately do it. Make it good.
Yeah.
I got a good idea, Hannah, that I think you're gonna like. A open world game based off Supernatural.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like that would translate well into a game.
Yeah, because there's so much in that universe, and
I feel like it would be very modern Witcher.
Yeah, their whole all myths are true thing, so they can you can just kind of have so many storylines you can play as. And
you drive around and kill monsters.
I could go on a whole list. I could just keep going in this whole idea, of what I want translated into what. I could do that all day, more than a day. It would just take forever. I would never stop. But anyways, that's
cool.
That's pretty much our time.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool if you're listening, you could let us know what you would like to see adapted from one version to another.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what fan fiction is for. So write something if you want, and maybe it'll be made into a movie or TV show.
I saw Josh's face. I still think we gotta have an episode about fan fiction. I want to know all of your thoughts, Josh.
Yeah. I would love that. So
it's weird. It's weird, man.
Let us know what you guys like for adaptations. What you thought what do you think are some of the best? What do you think are some of the worst? And what you would adapt to what? All right. So what do we have next week? Hannah, is that you?
Yes, that's me. Next week, we are going to be talking about time travel. What's the best way to time travel? How would you do it? Where would you go? And I think it might be interesting if we explain why all of it's kind of a bad idea.
Yeah.
It is. That's why you only go forward in time.
No, even that's a bad idea. It's all a bad idea.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it.
All right. Well, thanks guys for coming by. I hope you enjoyed. And until next time, nerd out.
Goodbye.